Hello coaches, there's no doubt that data is one of the fastest growing areas of the game today. Many clubs around the world are employing data scientists to work at their club. But what exactly do data scientists do? How can we learn from them? And how can we potentially follow in that career pathway? That's what we're going to look at. I recently talked to Julio Costa, full-time professional data analyst at Fulham FC in England, to get his views on his career pathway and some insights that he can share about the work that data is doing in everyday life at top football clubs. This is really, really interesting. 4 takeaways total. If you want to read the full interview, you can catch it below. Big thanks to our friends at KEYFRAME for teaming up with us on these interviews. You can get more information below and we'll talk about them at the halfway point. First up, I asked Julio about his background before he got the role at Fulham. And the big takeaways for me here are 1, his attitude to learning, and 2, his ability to merge education with getting experience, taking roles alongside his courses to get on the grass, to get around players, to get more experiences in delivering, more experiences in working, and how that then allows him further in the interview to merge coaching with data. This is really interesting. Here's step 1. A data scientist, I'm thinking Harvard degree, physics, math. Looking at your background, there's some coaching in there. You went over to the US, to Texas. How did you get into the data side?
Well, it's, as you said, it's a very different background. So I'm originally from Portugal, played football growing up, and was not good enough to make it as professional. When I was 19, I got offered a scholarship because I have dual citizenship, Portuguese and Angolan, and they offered possibilities to study in the US. So I went to Texas to study, first improve my English, then study sports at UT Austin, and completely different, study coaching and other things as well. But it was not tailored to football. It was more soccer, like more American football, and yeah. Still, it was really interesting. I had a teacher, Michael T. Saunders, that he was actually one of the pioneers in the university to use data analytics. And he was quite passionate about it, but I didn't know anything about it, honestly. I never had that, actually, someone speaking. I remember playing Football Manager, Championship Manager, and seeing the data side of it. But that was pretty much as much that I knew about data in football. Came to London 2016, got my level 1 and level 2, FA level 1 and FA 2 coaching qualifications, start coaching pretty much from the bottom, grassroots. Then as my experience started to increase, got offered better roles at either private academies with a good standard of football. And then lockdown came. And it was a really interesting time because I was, and I'm still finishing my master's in performance coaching at St. Mary's University here in London. And I had a module of performance analysis, which was fascinating. And this was at a time that I started reading a blog of a Portuguese performance analyst. And I really liked how you break down different oppositions and different style of plays. And I was like, okay, I'm actually looking forward for this module. It was really interesting. My visuals at the time were horrendous in Microsoft Excel. It was the worst thing ever. I remember that was the worst thing I was at. If I could show everyone what was my first visuals about Liverpool versus an Atletico Madrid game, pretty much was the analysis topic of that assignment. It was terrible, just really terrible. And from there, I really like it. Start looking into this community on Twitter that people posted different data visualizations. I was like, okay, that's quite interesting. And throughout this period of the pandemic, the first lockdowns in London, I got some experience already under my belt with some scouting remotely, doing remotely for different clubs. So I've done it for Mansfield Town. And then I joined this second division Danish club called Nasvet Ball Club. And I was doing the same thing, remote scouting, looking at players. There was some data, but we were not aware of that. We were just literally scouting the player, identified what type of player and so on. And then at the time I started practicing the data side because I was really fascinating with everyone on Twitter doing it. I was like, wow, I want to do that. But I learned they were doing this on a programming language, and at the time I didn't know how to program. So I used this Tableau software, which is a free tool. That obviously there's the subscription version that allows you to do more than that, but there's a public version. And I start practicing with free data sources that I found online. It was like, okay, I want to do this graph. I want to do this graph. I want to learn the techniques, how to do it. And that's how I became a data analyst. And then from there, because of my skills that I picked up, just on my own throughout lockdown, NAS Football Club was like, okay, do you want to be the data analyst for the club? It was volunteer, but it was like, yeah, okay, good experience. So I've done it. The club was going through a new ownership and they became more data driven. So for a few months I was doing that. It was a good experience getting to know that. And just as lockdown started to easing up, I resumed a coaching and a performance analysis, kind of performance analyst role that I had it just before lockdown started with this private academy. And that's when I became applying more into youth development. It was really interesting because we didn't have much to work on. Fortunately for me, I did have a data set of these wearable devices called Playmaker, which it will give you different physical metrics. And it was a good starting point, plus a different basic statistics that I would collect myself through video, which was nothing fancy. It was literally iPad trying to get the best KPIs that I would choose and see what they would tell me about the game.
Second of all, merging data with coaching. Key line that Julio says here, data for the sake of having data is nothing. And this is key, understanding where data fits in the environment and then how to use it to enhance the experience of players and the processes of coaches, putting that all together, helping players and coaches work at their maximum. And this is where Julio's previous work as a coach and his courses have all come together to help him facilitate information and understand how it can be delivered, when it can be delivered, how it can help players. This is really interesting, this part.
As I usually say, data just by the sake of having data is nothing. There's nothing you can, like, I can say, oh, this player has 20 goals. This player has 10 assists. Okay, that's great. So scores 20 goals and scores 10 assists. Everyone can read that. But throughout my role now with Fulham, I change the way I've seen things. And even before that, when I start looking at these different data sets, you start trying to going, and again, this is something I've done it as when I started looking at data. It's like, oh, what can I look to the data rather than what can I find about the data, which is two completely different things. I would say it was a really big advantage for me to have worked at different capacities in football because it let me understand what and I'm still learning because me seeing data is completely different as someone who is not used to as a coach or another member of staff. So it's important for you to kind of see the other side of what is valuable from other perspectives. It's really interesting because we have a lot of players. So part of my role is also being part of chats with players. We have chats, and again, when it's the coach is having a chat, and maybe the player might not understand what the coach might be saying. So then the performance analysis comes with the video, and I come with the data. It's like, look, this is what's happening. Can you see this on data? And then can you see this on the video? And it's really important to link these two to show and reinforce that message to the player. I would say right now it's easier because there's a lot of stats going around, and a lot of these players are used to play FIFA and play games like that actually show some metrics, and for them it's easier to understand. And let's be honest, if they are in professional environments, it makes it even easier for them because they're used to that. They understand that is part of the way that they need to be evaluated, and even to grow, it's getting those type of data. And it's interesting because data is everywhere. You will go now and you see something on a TV and it tells you player has done this, player has done this much. So I would say this generation of players, they're quite used to that.
Third part is where context is key. So this is where Julio talks about how he assesses players throughout recruitment and the processes around that using data. Why does one player play well in one system as opposed to another system? Or how does one player play well at one club as opposed to another club? Some great insight here. He points us in the right direction and then asks us what type of questions we should be looking at when we are evaluating talent and evaluating players. It brings us along nicely. Something that now looking into the how to read data, how to interpret data, how to prioritize it. Something that you posted a while back is around a certain tweet about a player. You said, when I look at players' data, I try to understand 1 position, 2 the role, 3 context of team style of play, 4 find strengths and weaknesses, 5 player contribution to the team. Then I show what I got in key points. And I found that really interesting because mostly the coach's eye is, when you're talking about a player in traditional recruitment, it's just playing strengths and weaknesses. Do you prioritize the context in that position style? Is that your starting point, or did you put those in order?
Well, I put that in order because that's how I would approach. Again, I don't work with I'm not part of the recruitment department, but I do think every player is different depending on which manager, and that's always the question of why player X was not performing well in a club and then being a completely different player on club Y. That's exactly the reason, because the role is so different under a manager that has different ideas for the player. And you just look around at the biggest clubs in the world and how they're doing with the recruitment, and you start seeing these trends that they look at, okay, what kind of player do I need? What kind of role this player is going to fit? And then data doesn't tell you the type of person you are. It tells you what you do. But that's why people don't understand that clubs just don't use data. They use different things, and that is one of them. And then they look at the video. It's like, okay, now I understand the context why player is doing this volume of actions and why this player is doing such and such. And it's really important if we want to actually get a player in that model, because that is a model of how do you approach to a signing, for example, or to even developing player. You need to see what the player where the player plays, what kind of role is the player, so you then actually change your profile approach. And it's not even on just recruitment, even your own players. If you want to evaluate them correctly, I would say that if I don't know if my right winger, or let's say just because of the norm, if I'm putting this player as a right winger, that actually his role is a right winger, when you can find a best suited role for him or for her in this case, depending on the player. So and people are so like, sometimes they're stuck into, oh, this is a center midfielder. There's millions of roles a center midfielder can do, for example. It's just finding the best metrics in this case, considering the role of the player and how your team wants to perform, that it will be the best.
Hello coaches, we'll take a quick break here from Julio. Big thanks to KEYFRAME. We're teaming up with them again. If you're a coach who puts presentations together, interested in analysis, interested in improving how you present information to players, please check out KEYFRAME. We've worked with them for a couple of years. Top class product, improves understandings for players. Telestration animations, they're normally very hard to produce and takes a lot of time. KEYFRAME solve that issue. Simple to use, fast to learn, and most importantly, affordable. Here's a quick look at what they do. Number 4 is about reading data, another common theme that Julio talks about throughout the interview: context. Understand the number of variables that you're going to get exposed to as a data analyst. How do you know which one is more valuable than another? Here he looks at a player's radar that I got from his social media that he put up a while ago, and I want to get his thoughts on it. Turns out that he's actually evolved his work since he put this post up, but it's really interesting to hear how he's evolved his work, what questions he's asking of himself, what he's learning from his role at Fulham on top of what he knew before. And again, the type of questions we should be asking as coaches when we are presented with data and information around players' performance.
It's quite interesting because he actually is now at Napoli.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He was a player that actually caught my eye at the time. He is Georgian. He played against Spain in a qualifier. And I was like, okay, he's quite impressive player. And then I went to look at the player, the data from the Russian Premier League at the time, and I found it was quite interesting. But yeah, this is an example, and it's funny because I don't even do this anymore. We do it very differently. But it's a good way to starting a conversation. Okay, this is where the player is. Thinking now, I would probably not even use these specific metrics. Or if I use these ones, I use them adjusted, because that's what you need to do. They need to be adjusted metrics, not just how many goals players score or on what. In this case, we're looking at the distribution where the player is falling, and the higher the values of this percentile in this case is quite high on a few metrics, and that is the difference between gauging where the player is compared to, let's say, if I just show the raw number of goals or shots that a player has. We have to normalize these values in more mathematical expressions. We need to see where that player falls into, let's say, goal score in 90 minutes. And I would say this is a really funny thing because not a lot of people know. Gareth Bale, for example, he was the leading scorer of 2 seasons ago when he was at Tottenham in the Premier League by the minutes that he played. So he actually had the highest goals scored in 90 minutes, where a lot of people don't know about that, which is a matter of actually looking at the impact that these players make, because that's what you want to see, the impact. If this player is a left winger and then you start seeing some things like, okay, doesn't progress much, it recovers, is actually quite not a bad thing to do. But again, this is what people usually start as a starting point, to look at what the player is doing. Then from there, you start looking at, okay, so how many wingers are actually in this league with the same minutes or X amount of minutes? Then you start looking that the distribution of that player might decrease or increase. And it starts giving you a bit more context. And then from there, you look at more advanced metrics. For example, I would look at where Kvisha's key passes actually come from, or what are the success rate of the crosses from open play, or let's say what are the because usually, for example, different data providers have different things as chance created or maybe our assists and key passes. I would look at different things. What could I see from this player is not that good in terms of duels, but then again, it's expected from a winger. Unless it's a wing back, then you wouldn't really know that. But you still have to see players that will engage into something. So let's say pressures. If I knew that this player was attempting some kind of pressures because my team is a high pressing team, then that could be a problem if the players' success of the pressures are quite low. But then again, it's interesting that he recovers a lot of balls. So I would look into how does he actually recovers a lot of. He's on the top 19 players that recover balls. 19. It's like, why? How is this possible? So then it could give me some kind of conclusion that, okay, so actually, rather than having duels, I would actually have interceptions, because they're probably most likely the way that this player actually recovers the ball. And it has to be with pace, because he's quite fast. So if I had some physical data comparable to the league, I could probably see him as being one of the fastest players in the league. So there's different approaches, and again, this is a fairly easy, I would say, in my eyes, because I've done it so many times, because I've actually can digest this and I understand how easy it is for me to do it, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 12 to 14 metrics in this radar. It could be less than that. I could create a radar just for attacking metrics, and I could create a different radar for defensive metrics, for example. But how it is that you try to see as a whole. So sometimes you have radars with, I don't know, 15 metrics. Depends on what the manager he's able to see. I work with some people that they love that.
So there you have it. The full interview with Julio is below. If you want to check it out, please, before you go, give it a like and a subscribe. I love that interview. The big takeaways for me is that area of collaboration, how to understand how to work with coaches, how to understand how to work with players, how to understand how to look at data and know what's important and what you might need to look a bit deeper in and what you might need to question a little bit more. And I think that was a common theme throughout the interview, is Julio asking, well, maybe you might need this context or that context, or you might need to know more about that there. There's so much to it, and I think the more you know, then the more you need to understand what questions to ask. But there's no doubt that data is fast approaching becoming a necessity for coaches. Maybe not understanding it in terms of being able to put it all together and being efficient and fluid in Tableau and all these different systems, but in 5 or 10 years, you probably will need to be able to communicate to people using it, or be able to communicate to people and ask questions to understand it a little bit better. People like Julio are brilliant with their generosity around sharing their knowledge and sharing their time. So make sure you follow up with him, give him a follow on social media. But before you go, give this a like and a subscribe, and we will be back soon. Thank you.